one of the, if not the premier research institutes for consciousness expansion. They invented this hemisync technology that everybody's talking about. They're the place that the CIA had that report out on the internet that was, popular on social media just recently of, the gateway tapes and the gateway protocol. And like in the case of Joe McMoneagle, who was remote viewer number one.
What is the Monroe Institute?
So the Monroe Institute is one of the, if not the premier research institutes for consciousness expansion. And on the East Coast, at least, if not in the country. Now, that begs the question, okay, so what is consciousness? And consciousness is that place within us that we observe from. It's a separate space from our minds because, like if we talked about the last episode, we talked about one characteristic, one phenomenon of consciousness versus our mind's knowledge. If we can take our consciousness and see what our mind is doing with our emotions and stuff like that, see our mind in operation, that proves that consciousness is separate from our mind. And so we're not exactly sure. We don't have a complete definition of what consciousness is. No one agrees on the definition of consciousness. There are a lot of scientists out there that say consciousness is an emergent property of the complex system of our brains, and if our brains weren't there, we wouldn't have consciousness. And while that's true to a point, it doesn't necessarily say that consciousness is just in our brains. And I feel that the evidence that science is putting forward is that consciousness is actually out beyond our bodies as well as something that we experience through our bodies. But when you reach out of your body into consciousness, you can do things like remote viewing and to see into the future, to discern information, which, by the way, comes from a study that was done 90 times in 33 different independent labs in 14 different countries that showed human beings can literally look into the future regarding a task that they're doing now. Well, expansion out into that consciousness is that practice of taking your mind and going out beyond your body to find out the cool things that you can do with it and the cool things that you can experience with it and the new things that you can learn and the ways that you can use it for things like remote viewing. And so Monroe is that place that helps develop technology to help humans expand that consciousness out beyond their body and do really cool things with it. So they have, they invented this hemisync technology that everybody's talking about. They're the place that the CIA had that report out on the internet that was, popular on social media just recently of, the gateway tapes and the gateway protocol. They invented that. And that's what the government was using and experimenting with and researching regarding expansion of consciousness, using the human's innate ability to reach out beyond the body into consciousness to do cool stuff. That's what Monroe is.
Are they just into, I shouldn't say just, but is the focus remote viewing, or is there other aspects of consciousness that they're researching as well?
There are other aspects. They're number one in remote viewing because of their history of helping to develop a training program for the CIA and military industrial remote viewers that they developed the program for. They trained the people in the government who were remote viewers for a number of years before they actually had their own program set up internally. So that's kind of their pedigree and their history, is being the top place that trained all the remote viewers and put together a training program that allowed for people to do that kind of cool stuff. But then they branched out into other stuff, like Bob Monroe, who started the Monroe Institute, who's no longer with us. He was interested in all kinds of cool stuff and the utilization of technology to expand consciousnesses in multiple places. So now they got courses on how to reach out and communicate with extraterrestrial entities, like, some crazy fringe stuff, but they also have other stuff like how to train yourself for potentially having out-of-body experiences and extending your consciousness out to go see things, not in a remote viewing fashion, but to go see other places and other things that aren't local to your body consciousness. And they've got all kinds of stuff, and they do some, it's almost like a philanthropy or an outreach to spirits. One of their programs reaches out to lost souls that haven't found their way to their final destination after their death. They're confused. about, where they are and what happened and yada, yada, yada. They lost their life suddenly and they're just wandering around. And they have a program that's designed to help go out and reach those folks and lead them into a place where they can, finally get to their final destination. It's like, and there's science up there that helps validate a lot of what they're doing in the physical realm to say there's evidence that proves that this stuff is effective. There's evidence, and like in the case of Joe McMoneagle, who was remote viewer number 1 for the Army intelligence and CIA program that they put together, his evidence is irrefutable. Like that's on government record that he did all this stuff and was able to go to other places from his living room in Virginia and then out an entire nuclear sub program for the Russian military, where he was the only one in the room who drew the sub with all these characteristics, and then it proved to be completely accurate. And he drew it from his living room in Virginia.
That is the most remarkable. When we spoke on the phone,
Yeah.
and you told me about that, that is the most remarkable remote viewing piece of information I've ever heard.
That's not even his best one, but it's pretty impressive. You want me to tell the story?
Not yet. We'll get to that.
Okay.
We'll get to that. I want to stick with the Monroe Institute, Bob Monroe.
Yeah.
And how long has the Monroe Institute been around?
Hey everybody, I'm Shawn Ryan. Click here to subscribe to the Shawn Ryan Show YouTube channel for the hottest and most compelling interviews that you will not see anywhere else. I've also made a playlist of all the previous SRS episodes so they're easy to find. You can find that right here.